Representative Nelson, if you're prepared, and I should acknowledge while I'm thinking of it, I'm not sure if there'll be questions of her, but Julie Blaha, the state auditor, I think is here somewhere. Around the corner? Okay. I think the provision that the state auditor was mainly interested in will be resolved with an amendment, but she is available if need be. Representative Nelson, if you'd care to make a motion.
Mr. Chair and members, I'll move the adoption of the State Government Finance Division report for House File 1935.
Mr.
Okay,
Chair,
the motion is before us.
and I would, as of yesterday, I would also ask for a roll call on that.
Okay, roll call has been requested. Any discussion? Let me know when you're ready. You all set? Okay, the clerk will take the roll.
Representative Carlson,
Aye.
Representative Olson, Representative Garofalo, Representative Albright,
No.
Representative Bernardi,
Aye.
Representative Davids, Representative Dabney, Representative Driscowski. No. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Representative Hamilton. Representative Hansen.
Aye.
Representative Hausman.
Yes.
Representative Hertas. Representative Hornstein.
Yes.
Representative Kresha. Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Representative Lilly. Representative Long.
Yes.
Representative Mariani.
Yes.
Representative Markwart.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Noor.
Yes.
Representative Pulowski. Representative Poppy.
Yes.
Representative Schumacher.
No.
Representative Scott.
Nope.
Representative Torkelson.
No.
Representative Vogel.
No.
Representative Wagenius.
Yes.
Okay, being 14 yeses and 7 noes, the motion prevails. Representative Nelson, care to make another motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that House File 1935 as amended be recommended to be placed on the general register.
Okay, the motion is before us. Now, there are some amendments. Would you like to take the amendments now to get the bill in the order that you'd like?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have the A54 amendment, and Mr. Chair and members, when we were in committee and we took up amendments, there were some of them that we accepted, but as we were talking about these, and I said it multiple times in committee, that if we find out after we get the bill done that night, if there's cost to them or issues with them, we will have an amendment to take them back out in committee. And this amendment encompasses 2 amendments we had in committee. The one being the A10 amendment, which is the one that actually had costs, and I think that's the one you referenced the auditor about, and it's dealing with campaigning laws and how when we're in the legislature, when we go sine die, 60 days after that, we have to stop mass communications from the Capitol because it interferes with campaigning. And the amendment was to make the constitutional officers on the same track as the House, which in one way was problematic because they have 4-year terms. But the issue that came up with this is the Secretary of State, part of their job is, whoever is in that position, is to promote the elections, keep people getting out and voting, and this would have eliminated or prohibit him, the Secretary of State, from being able to do that. Also, there are communications that go out from the auditor's office. Also, it was raised that every state website has a picture of the governor on it. And so if the governor's on that, the cost of having to take the governor's picture and pictures of them, promoting the deer hunting opener, which falls right into that time frame, those type of things would have to cease. So, and that would be a huge cost. And then after the election, they'd have to be put back on. So that's what that portion of it does. The other piece had to do with solar and solar panels that are being installed or have to be when they do the architectural work and the planning work for building new buildings or remodeling buildings that the state owns, that solar or renewable energy has to be considered as part of that. In the bill, there was a cap that was on there of 350 kilowatts that's being removed. And there was some concern that, well, if we generate a lot of electricity, we're going to be dumping this back on and having to selling it back to the grid, and then we shouldn't be making money and shouldn't be competing with our utility companies. The reason that this is problematic is buildings that we bond either have used bond funds to build or remodel. If we were to make money off of those buildings by selling this energy back to the local municipalities, would put those bonds in jeopardy, and they would lose their tax exempt status, which would have a whole nother ramifications. So we're taking those two pieces back out.
Okay, so the motion is before us to adopt the A54 amendment. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Albright.
Mr. Chair, just so I don't forget it, I would request a roll call on the amendment itself, the A54.
Roll call has been requested.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
Representative Albright.
thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Nelson, we've had some conversations about this. While I understand the rationale per se with removal of both those amendments that we just did in the markup here a couple days ago, I would have hoped that we've had a little more time to understand the costing on those. We didn't talk about those in terms of identifying costs on those. I'm sure other members are wondering about those, and so I'll just leave my comments with that pursuant to just to wrap up, Mr. Chair.
Representative Graffo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Nelson, obviously I'm opposed to this amendment. I'm confused why you're making your members vote on this as opposed to just taking care of it in conference committee, but regardless, I would ask members to vote no on this bill, or vote no on this, your amendment.
Representative Nelson.
Well, Mr. Chair, members, the reason we're taking these out is because it would put our bill over the target we have, and therefore we'd be violation of the budget the budget resolution. So that's why we're taking them out, and that's why I said it in committee that if we find out that they add to the cost of the bill, we have to take them back out.
And one of the things is that we try to get the bills in the best form possible, and this is the last stop before the House floor. So, but one crucial point is we do have to make sure they are within their target. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, was there a fiscal note on that portion that we're deleting from the bill? There wasn't.
Not on the amendment, no. Okay, any further questions or discussions? Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Nelson, can you tell us where the expenses are in these amendments that requires you to adhere by what you promised the members in committee?
Mr. Chair and members, I did, in my description, I did. On the solar piece, that's not so much a cost to the, currently, or a cost to the bill, but that has to do with affecting our bonds and our bond ratings and the ability to sell those as tax-free bonds if we're making money off of buildings that we own. And that's why we're taking that one out. We don't want to affect that piece of it. But in the solar piece, or excuse me, in the election piece that we described, it's the cost of having to reprogram all the websites of the state 60 days after we go sine die every 4 years. And actually, it's every 2 years is the way the amendment read. So every 2 years, we'd have to reprogram all the websites, taking the governor's websites, the governor's stuff off the auditor's website, the auditor's information off them, and then after the election, putting them back on. So that's the cost that's in there, and that there were some projections that I didn't get firm numbers, but there's some projections on that were given to us, and it again would have put the bill out of our target.
Any further discussion? Representative Drazkowski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Nelson. We don't see any paperwork affirming this. Those seem to be far grasps for legitimacy to taking them out of the bill. It seems to be, I'm not fully familiar with these provisions, but it seems to be a political decision rather than a fiscal one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, then Clerk will take the roll on the amendment, the A54.
Representative Carlson?
Aye.
Representative Olson?
Aye.
Representative Garofalo?
No.
Representative Albright?
No.
Representative Bernardi?
Aye.
Representative Davids? Representative Dabney?
Aye.
Representative Jaskowski? Representative Eklund?
Aye.
Representative Hamilton? Representative Hansen?
Aye.
Representative Hausman?
Yes.
Representative Hertas? Representative Hornstein?
Yes.
Representative Kresha?
No.
Representative Liebling?
Yes.
Representative Lilly?
Yes.
Representative Long?
Yes.
Representative Mariani? Representative Markwart?
Yes.
Representative Nelson?
No. No, yes. Confused, I was looking at the bill, sorry, yes.
Representative Noor?
Yes.
Representative Pulowski? Representative Poppy?
Yes.
Representative Schumacher?
No.
Representative Scott?
No.
Representative Torkelson? Representative Vogel?
No.
Representative Wagenius?
Yes.
Okay, being 18 ayes and 7 noes, motion passes, or the amendment passes. Representative Nelson on the bill?
Mr. Chair and members, there's basically 6 articles in the bill. The first article has to do with state government appropriations, and I believe you have this in your packet. Appropriations to all the constitutional officers, appropriations to the legislature, our budget, which is part of this, and the HAVA, and there's some professional technical services contract piece in there. The second one has to do with state government operations. There's some cleanup language here. The biggest part of this is, and we slimmed it down from what it was in the actual bill, but House File 1962, which that's not House File, it's 1962, get the right number. Anyway, it was a House file that had to deal with changing warrants, which is all throughout state statute, dealing with how we pay outside people and changing it to payment. Warrant is an old term, and that goes through the whole thing. We're extending the Legislative Data Practices Commission, and just other things, other government operation issues that go throughout the bill. In I'll go down by the articles here. We also have the elections article in here, which is the Article 4, which is the elections and voting right article. House File 1603 from the Elections Committee got rolled into this. And then there's that's Article 4. Article 3 was the payment technology piece. Article 5 is the campaign finance issues, basically the cleanup language for the campaign finance board. And then Article 6 is the redistricting piece. And that's basically the bill.
Okay, and is there any discussion then on the bill? Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chair Nelson, thank you for operating an efficient committee this session. Appreciated working with you on this bill. And members, this bill is not so much about what it does do, but what it doesn't do. And I'll just draw your attention to articles, particularly Article 4, as well as to some extent 5 and 6. But there has been a precedent over the 3 administrations just passed where there has never been an elections change that has not been supported with strong bipartisan support. This is where we deviate from that with this bill. We also deviate it in the function that it also has never been inserted into another bill. My recollections has been a standalone bill that has journeyed it by itself, and that is not the case in this bill as well. So while it's unfortunate that we have to, in a sense, have this tucked into the House State Government Finance Bill, I think it does a disservice to the greater public, because now they don't understand what elections are going to be like, because we'll be debating a state government finance bill with that tucked in. It's very unfortunate that we are not observing what other administrations have done, along with both members from both chambers in terms of support of election reform measures or election adjustment measures. And for that, members, and as well as other issues with the bill relevant to the other articles, I will not be supporting this bill, and I hope that members will also take that into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Nelson, did you say the HAVA funding is in this bill? I thought there was a conference committee for that.
Representative Nelson.
Mr. Chair, members, if you remember, there's discussions on the floor of the HAVA bill, House File 14. It was stated there was many amendments to try and put the $163,000 that the Secretary of State needs to access the full $6.5 million. And as I said on the floor, that funding would be in the state government finance bill, and that's the funding that's in here. Plus, all the House File 14 is in here, but that funding, the $163,000 that is needed to access the remainder of the money, is in this bill, and that's what I said on the floor.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Nelson,
Garofalo.
I'm sure that conference committee is going to be wrapping up in just a day or so here. Too.
Right.
Sounds like things are going pretty good.
Yeah.
Everything's going well, so. One last question before I get my closing statement. So the Legislative Budget Office, I actually thought that there was bipartisan consensus on this, and it seems to be that the House majority has opposition to this. Can you just expound on where that opposition comes from? And I mean, as a legislative branch, I think this is something that we're in favor of.
Representative Nelson.
Mr. Chair and members, and I probably should have pointed that out, but the Legislative Budget Office is in here where I'm eliminating it in my bill, partly because of the current Legislative Budget Office has, I believe, 6 employees. Able, I think they have 5 on working now, but they have to do 6. They're asking to double the size of their operation. They're saying they can't do what they're supposed to do with the people they have on, so they wanted a huge increase. This is plus when they're doing this money, they're still going to have to go to the Minnesota Management and Budget to get the information they need to make the fiscal notes. So what my bill does is it eliminates the Legislative Budget Office and leaves that function where it is in the Management and Budget. In Management and Budget, when we're in session, they move people from other duties into that. I believe the number I was told was 19 right now are working on our fiscal notes. When we're not in session, they move those people back to do other duties. The Legislative Budget Office, their only job would be to provide fiscal notes for us, which would be the 5 months of the year that we're here in session, the 2.5 months, 3 months that we are in the off year. The rest of the time, they would have no job to do, and so we'd have state employees without assigned tasks to be done, and therefore, I thought that was a wasteful spending of our taxpayer dollars, and the conservative side of me that some people may not believe is there, but the conservative, cheap Swede in me, I would say, thinks that's a wasteful spending of state dollars.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nelson, in the Senate bill, it looks like they take the carry forward of the House of Representatives and use it for spending and other purposes. How are we as the House retaliating against the Senate to offset that egregious policy?
Mr. Chair and Representative Garofalo, that'll be a discussion in conference, but I've tried to be better than the Senate and not do that, not go after them. I left their budget number the way it was. There's an increase in here for the state or for the House budget, but there is, they didn't give us a number to put in that they needed for more money, and so I didn't feel it was my place to go after them and take their money for other purposes, unlike what they did was trying to take our money, which is currently funding our salaries and our staff salaries in that budget. That the current budget that we have, we're actually underfunding what we're spending, and we're running deficit in the state, in the House of Representatives.
Well, Mr. Chairman and Representative Nelson, as one House member to another, I can just tell you that I feel your pain, and I see where the session's going. I've been where you're about to be going. So I do wish you the best of luck and hope that everything ends up okay.
In addition to that, the chair of this committee has also been there. In the end, we kind of accept the budget of the other body, and they accept ours. It's unfortunate, I guess, that a game is being played right now, but At
Oh.
any rate, hopefully it'll work out in the end for both bodies.
So, Mr. Chairman, just in closing, just on the fiscal matters, this bill, this is a 12% increase above the current base budget. This is financed primarily by tax increases, and it is growing government at an unsustainable level that is growing faster than the personal income of the private sector of the state. For that reason, I would ask members to vote no, and I wish you good luck, Mr. Representative Nelson.
And by the way, just to follow up on my earlier comments, the last time we had difficulty with the Senate and House budgets, we were one of the conferees, and the problem came out of the governor's office. And in the end, we worked it out. But I won't say which governor, you probably remember. At any rate, any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, this is one of the bills where we're going to have some motions to combine, in this case, the Veterans Bill. So Representative Nelson, would you like to move the language contained in House File 1935 as amended be included as separate articles in the Omnibus State Government and Veterans Affairs Bill?
Yes, I do.
Okay, the motion is before us.
You are now the chair.
And Representative, excuse me, we need to vote then. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried. I was getting a little bit ahead of myself. Representative Eklund, would you like to move to incorporate the language contained in House File 2086 as amended into House File 1935 as separate articles?
I so move, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
the motion is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, then, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carried. Representative Nelson then renews his motion that House File 1935, as amended, be recommended to be placed on the general register, and that staff be directed to make any technical corrections and amend the title. Any discussion? Seeing none, then, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carried.